there were some benefits in that Jesus was at one with God. That was a pretty big benefit.
Yeah, you'll see that as a benefit if I become at one with God again, like in the sense of our condition, which will mean that we have to become at one with our soul as well. So we don't know. This is an experiment. This is the first time anybody's returned. So we don't know whether that's going to happen. We are, we have faith that it's going to happen.
I was going to say, you've got faith,
I don't remember that faith, right?
and I am doing everything I possibly can to have that happen. But and so that would certainly provide some additional potential motivation for people's faith.
But it shouldn't need that, should it? In a way, like if we're self-responsible, right? And we're growing our own faith. It would help. I'm not saying if you guys are at one with God, they'll be like, wow. But yeah, do you know what I'm saying?
The thing you need is truth.
Yeah,
that's the thing you need more than anything else, and that has to come from an outside source. So, that it's not going to come from inside yourself. A lot of people think it does, but it doesn't. It has to come from an outside source. Now, so in that regard, you need somebody to share with you the truth. And, this is the opportunity the 14 had, was to come to earth and share the truth. Because we could see the truth was being diluted more and more and not being shared. And so, in that regard, you do need me.
Yes.
Does that make sense? In the sense of, you need someone to share the truth. But just like you'll need a guide in the spirit world when you arrive there, someone who can share the truth with you that's beyond your own condition to understand at the time. And everybody needs that, right? Yeah. Including myself. I that's the relationship I have with God. I need that truth from God, right? So everybody needs that to receive that truth. Of course, when you become at one with God, you then have that direct relationship established, which means that you can receive that directly from God, and so you don't really need anybody else to guide you. Although there's plenty of times when we have guided spirits in the celestial heavens, because there's certain things they couldn't understand that God was trying to share with them, for example.
Even though they're at one with God and stuff,
Yep. And still do.
Yep.
Still do. But you will find that your faith will improve when there's somebody around you who's reflecting God's love to the point where they're at one with God. That certainly is true.
Yeah.
Your faith will improve then, but not to the extent that you expect it to.
Because you still got to go through all your feelings and go through your false beliefs and all of growing your own faith. You've got to go through all of that yourself.
The reality is, if I was walking on water and flying in the sky and teleporting and everything else, say, who knows what we'll be able to do when we're one with us? I don't know. And AJ's got no idea. And so, but let's say all those things were possible, you'd still have to go through the emotional thing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Which is why
that's where most people don't have faith.
Yeah.
And this is just on the topic of faith, I was reading a Paget message from, I think it was John the Baptist.
Yep.
I'm not going to try and say because I'll butcher it, but he was saying something about, I think James Paget asked him about faith, and he said, we didn't have much, but one thing we did have was faith. And he said it's so important, and I was just wondering, what things did some of your friends and stuff develop at the time, which made them just no, this is it, this is how it is. I'm just going to live by the principles, no matter what. How did that happen for those guys? And obviously, who had or even all the people who weren't in the recorded or didn't do private messages. I was just wondering about that.
Well, if you think about, I would say in my first century life, the majority of people didn't have a lot of faith until I died. like there were some, like Mary and John, the Apostle John, who had some faith before I died, but the majority didn't. Even though miracles were performed and other things happened, and it was evident through my behaviour that I loved them and cared about them and all these things, many of them didn't have enough faith before I died to believe everything I said.
Well, they didn't have any love of truth external to their own version of truth for the majority.
Yeah, or any faith or much humility, or
Yeah.
you know, they had the same problems you guys have. Many of the men had the same problems, exactly the problems you have.
Yeah.
Yeah. And of course, it was only over time through the development of their own, through experience and things being proven to them through their life that true faith got developed. So while John the Baptist had some faith, like he had faith that I was the Messiah, for example, before I passed, he didn't have a lot of faith in some of the things I said before I passed. Because if he had it, he wouldn't have kept doing what he was doing, and he wouldn't, which would have meant that he would have lived probably a bit longer life than he did live.
Did he die before you?
Yeah, he did.
Yeah.
Yeah, he died around about 18 months before me. Yeah. And it was because he was quite antagonistic towards Herod in particular, who he didn't like very much. And he hadn't dealt with his love issues with his dad and a number of other things that caused him to act in the manner he did. And that led to his death, right? And he kept poking a spirit-influenced bear, which is what Herod was. You know, so Herod was under a lot of spirit control, and John the Baptist just kept poking him all the time in the eye, basically, hoping that eventually he'd get a good response, when the only thing that could happen from John's behaviour was a bad response, right? And sometimes we talked about it, but John didn't have enough faith to trust what I was saying at the time. That makes sense?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he trusted some things,
Yes.
but other things, because of the emotional injuries and his desire to not be humble to those emotional injuries,
Yep.
caused all these negative things like his death and
Yep.
I don't know like where he first ended up in the spirit world or whatever, but
He was in the first sphere.
Yeah.
Not in the hell cells, because he dealt with some of his own sin, and he wasn't a violent person.
no.
But he had quite a lot of addictions, like that he had to address, and he hadn't received much of God's love.
But he did receive some before he died.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. Mm.
And so he passed in a place that he would otherwise not passed into because of the fact that he'd received God's love, and then he had to make progress through the issues that he faced. But you're right in the sense that he had faith in the truth of it, although not a lot of faith in the specific things I was saying to him about his own problems. Makes sense?
Which pretty much all of us have that problem.
Pretty much, yeah. The
You
average
know?
person,
Like
the average person's pretty happy to believe what I tell them about God, the universe, and all these other things.
And
But
other people.
And other people,
Yeah.
But when it comes to believing the things I tell them about themselves, the average person
that's right, yeah.
doesn't really have much faith in it at all.
Yeah.
And doesn't learn to have faith in those things until much later in their development generally.
But Nikki, it wasn't like a magical time where
No.
these laws operated differently on individual people's
No.
souls. You know, it's the same process of developing faith that everyone then had to go through as what
Yeah.
everyone now has to
Yeah.
go through.
The same process I'm explaining to you.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. There were some benefits in that Jesus was at one with God. That was a pretty big benefit.
Yeah, you'll see that as a benefit if I become at one with God again, like in the sense of our condition, which will mean that we have to become at one with our soul as well. So we don't know. This is an experiment. This is the first time anybody's returned.
Mm.
So we don't know whether that's going to happen. we are, you know, we have faith that it's going to happen.
I was going to say, you've got faith, you know.
So, and we're,
I don't
doing,
remember that faith right there.
and I am doing everything I possibly can to like have that happen. But and so that would certainly provide some additional potential motivation for people's faith.
But it shouldn't need that, should it? In a way, like if we're self-responsible, right? Like, and we're like growing our own faith, like it would help. Like, I'm not saying like if you guys are at one with God, they'll be like, wow, like, but yeah, like, do you know what I'm saying?
The thing you need is truth.
Yeah.
That's the thing you need, more than anything else. And that has to come from an outside source. So, you know, that it's not going to come from inside yourself. A lot of people think it does, but it doesn't. It has to come from an outside source. Now, so in that regard, you need somebody to share with you the truth. And, you know, this is the opportunity the 14 had, was to come to earth and share the truth. Because we could see the truth was being diluted more and more and not being shared. And so, you know, in that regard, you do need me.
Yes.
Does that make sense? In the sense of, so you need someone to share the truth. But just like you'll need a guide in the spirit world when you arrive there, someone who can share the truth with you that's beyond your own condition to understand at the time. And everybody needs that, right?
Yeah.
Including myself. I that's the relationship I have with God. I need that truth from God, right? So everybody needs that to receive that truth. Of course, when you become at one with God, you then have that direct relationship established, which means that you can receive that directly from God, and so you don't really need anybody else to guide you. Although there's plenty of times when we have guided spirits in the celestial heavens,
Okay.
as a, you know, because there's certain things they couldn't understand that God was trying to share with them, for example.
Even though they're at one with God and stuff, yeah.
Yep. And still do.
Yep.
Still do. But you will find that your faith will improve when there's somebody around you who's reflecting God's love to the point where they're at one with God. That certainly is true.
Yeah.
Your faith will improve then, but not to the extent that you expect it to.
You still got to go through all your feelings and go through your false beliefs and all of growing your own faith. Like, you've got to go through all of that yourself.
The reality is, if I was like walking on water and, you know, flying in the sky and teleporting and everything else, say, who knows what we'll be able to do when we're one with us? I don't know. And, you know, AJ's got no idea. And so, but let's say all those things were possible, you'd still have to go through the emotional thing.
Yeah.
Yes.
And
Which is why
that's
it's
where
thing.
most people don't have faith.
Yeah.
And this is the thing where it's like, you're always trying to teach us about going through these things because we have to go through them. No, like even if you guys become at one with God, like you said, it's build our faith. But at the end of the day, I'm still at home by, you know, with me. I've got God if I want to talk to God or speak to, like, ask help from God and my guide and stuff. But I still got to do that.
That's right.
You know, you guys will be teaching whoever, who knows.
Yeah.
You know, I'll be in somewhere else. Just, do I want to do this? Like,
That's right. You'll be in the same state, deciding about whether you want to do what's been suggested. So it's one, like I said earlier to Claudia, it's one thing to receive the education, right? Many of you will get that education, and as time goes on, you'll get more education in faith as well. So you get that education, but there's the other aspect: is are you going to do it?
exactly.
And that, you know,
nobody can make that decision for you.
nobody.
And that's the good part of the design, I think.
And no amount of anybody around you doing amazing things is going to necessarily change your mind on that either.
It might just make you really angry.
Yeah, because you guys would have probably seen loads of people in the first century, right?
Yep.
How many of those actually were sincere versus how many were angry, you know?
Yeah, there probably, by the time I died, there might have been 500 sincere people maybe.
Oh,
Which is a fair bit.
that's a lot.
Yeah, but when you compare all the people we talked to, which was
A lot more.
probably 1 million or more, not a very high percentage. And many of them learnt to develop that sincerity that had begun by the time I passed over the course of their life. So they improved their sincerity, many of them, and before they passed. But, you know, they'd seen more than you've already seen, in a lot of regards, you know.
Oh, in terms of like the miracles and stuff.
Yeah, things like that, and also, you know, the reflection of God's love towards people. So they'd seen all of that. And they'd also seen me after I died. So they had that advantage as well, where I actually appeared to them after I passed. So of course there was that added advantage too by that stage. But even with all of that, many of them still arrived in the first sphere of the spirit world. Yeah, and some in the hells. Yeah, Peter the Apostle Peter arrived in the hells when he passed. So, you know, there's the education, and then there's the sincere application.
There's the doing it, you know. Got to be doers, like.
Yeah. And it's so important to work through, like, the important thing I feel is to work through coming to love the principle for the principle's sake.
For the beauty of
For
the
the
principle.
beauty of the
Yeah.
principle. Like, it's so important to come to love the principle for its own sake. You know, there are certain things that other people around you can do to prove things to you, but that doesn't guarantee you're going to come to love the principle itself for its own sake, within yourself, you know. That requires your own effort and your own time and your own energy and your own desire and passion and faith and to be developed and humility to be developed, and nobody can really help you with that. It's something that you're going to have to do for yourself. Does that make sense to you? And without doing that, your progress will be relatively slow. If you're waiting for people around you to demonstrate things to you in order for you to get faith in the principles, then you're going to take a long time to get faith in the principles. Does that make sense? And remember that every principle you have faith in is going to increase your faith in God, because the principles are a part of God's personality. That they are actually a part of God's nature, these principles. Every law that God created was based on these principles. So you can see that the more in harmony you get with the principle, the more in harmony you get with God as well. And the more in harmony you get with every law, right? And this is why it's very important to have that love of God's love written on your heart, because then the principles are there on your heart, and then you can't break them. You know, it's impossible to break them after that. And that's why it's so important to do that. And it doesn't matter what is demonstrated you external to yourself. It doesn't guarantee that the principles will be in your heart. Yeah.
I can see that that's true.
Yeah.
You know, I can see that because, you know, you guys are awesome teachers, but I just know it's me. I'm not doing the things that you're teaching. That's what's the problem.
Well, the two problems, isn't there? There's the acceptance of the education, isn't there? There's the education itself, and then the acceptance of the education. And then there's, okay, I'm going to sincerely put that education into practice in my day-to-day existence. There's the two aspects, isn't there? And so a lot of people are prepared to accept some education. Some. Particularly the education that's not about them.
All the bad things about what they're doing, the sins that they're engaging in and stuff.
Oftentimes they're not even able to accept the good things that they're doing, let alone the bad things. And like there's many conversations I've had with people where I feel, I've said to them, you're doing this thing well, and they can't even accept that, you know what I mean? So the average person is okay accepting external truths about God, the universe, and how wonderful all that is. And you know what it was like for many of you when you started listening? It was like you had to be there, right? You thought, oh yeah, go along once and we'll see what it's like, right? And then after you get sort of hooked on it, because that's what happens, you're sort of like, I got to go every weekend. Like, what's going on? I got to go there every weekend. And many of you, you're in that honeymoon period of divine truth. You came to every seminar we did. Many of you, right? Because there's this sort of love of the external truth, right? But when there's a lot of Australian quote use. I won't use any bad ones. When the going gets tough, or you could say, when the no, that's not one of the things.
I didn't hear that one.
No, we won't repeat it. And like when the tyre hits the road, you could say, or whatever. And when everything gets moving forward, the key is going to be your application, your sincere application of the truths that are about you as well. You see, a lot of times we receive all this external truth about the universe and everything, but we don't think that it applies to us. It's sort of like, oh yeah, isn't that wonderful? Isn't that wonderful? Isn't that truth wonderful? Isn't that a wonderful concept? And all, and we're looking at it all very externally, and we're going, oh, isn't it all wonderful externally? But we're not seeing very clearly that it was going to one day, in order for it to benefit me, I am going to have to imbibe that external truth into me, in order for it to benefit me. If I don't get it in me, then you can see that I can listen to it in my ears for the rest of my existence. It's not going to benefit me a single iota. Right? For it to benefit me, it has to become a part of me. Right? And that's the struggle that everybody who hears divine truth ever in history has ever had, is not listening to the external truth. That's the easy part. It's so beautiful. Why wouldn't you want to listen to it? The hard part is getting it in me. Yep. And that's the thing that takes time, and it takes energy and effort, and it takes diligence and sincerity, it takes faith and courage, and it takes a lot of things that are really good things to develop that most of us think are not good things. Like good things to develop, persistence and regularity and all sorts of qualities you're going to have to develop in order for that to occur.
And that confronts all the addictions as well. When
course.
When you're developing persistence, you've got to give up. I want the easy thing. I want to do.
Correct.
You've got to give up all of that.
Correct. Yeah. If any of you have hoped that there was a magical solution, isn't that not true? Like,
absolutely.
If you think about it, even before you even heard divine truth, many of you go, "Oh, where's the?" You go to this event, go to that, hoping for some magical thing to come along and see how magical it all is and how much magical change there's going to be. It's not ever going to be. It's going to be driven by sincerity. And I love that about God making it that way, because it means that you also have a large amount of sense of self after you've done it. It's sort of like, because you're learning about yourself as you're doing this, right?
And your own capacity.
And your own capacity to understand, and your own
your abilities that are beyond what you thought you had.
Correct.
Like expansion beyond what you thought you
yeah,
could do.
there's just so many benefits from the way God does it. You imagine if there was a magical wipe out all your sin and you're done.
You wouldn't learn anything.
You wouldn't know anything really either, would you? You wouldn't know what created your sin, why it was created, how it got created, why it was bad in the first place, what was...
You just have a ton of demands, wouldn't you?
Well, even if the demand could get rid of, even if you could get rid of that sin, so let's say you got rid of all your sins, so there wouldn't be demands, Nikki, after that.
Yes.
Yeah. So even if you did all that, you'd still have no knowledge. And there would be no soul knowledge, no feeling knowledge.
And
so when you're presented with the same situations again, what are you going to do? You don't know really what to do because there was no knowledge based on the soul in you to know what to do. You
just do it all
in
again.
a way, you'd just be like a child who just arrived on earth in an adult body, not knowing what to do still, but there's no sin, but within a short period of time there'd probably be sin again. Yeah. That's why God's way is the most economical way of dealing with these problems.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, it's awesome, man. It's like,
so good. Preach it, baby.
Preach it, baby. No, you can't preach something that's not in you, right? But once it's in you, you'll feel like it, because it's, you know, it's very hard to have it in you and then go, I'm not going to do anything about this now. Like, you realise how important it is for everything. You know, I know many of you are yet to experience bliss in your life, but a part of bliss is having a feeling and it being satisfied at the very moment you had your feeling. Right? And that's only possible once you have the principles in your life, because every time you have the principles in your heart, you have a feeling that's in harmony with the principle. There's the way God's created the universe is every feeling you have in harmony with the principle creates a subsequent response from the universe itself to satisfy your feeling. Right? And that's part of the reason why our spirit friends in the celestial heavens experience bliss. Because it's like every desire they have is loving, and it's satisfied the moment they have it.
Yeah, you're just fully breathing and living it, aren't you? At that point, it's like, it's everything. It's everything to you.
Yeah, and you know, God's created an awesome universe, a playground. You know, it's just like full of very interesting, far more interesting than what's on Earth. You know, and it's full of interesting things, and the more you're able to experience of that, the more joy you're going to experience as well. And to have some faith in that while you're here. I know the Earth you're looking at the moment, she's in a bit of a mess, right?
Yeah.
The people are in a mess, the Earth's in a mess.
Yeah.
But that's only because of the unreality we created out of harmony with the principles. You know, we've created this altered reality. It's a you know, what we have on Earth now is not how God designed the Earth to be, and it's not how God designed it to function, because there's all the emotions of the individuals affecting its functioning. But it's not what God created it to be. And don't measure your future life by what's here. Because it's very dangerous to do that, because this is what we see around us is a result of sin. It's not the result
It's not
of
God's what God intended at all, is it? You know?
No.
Just like with us, like God's not intended we live like this with pain and suffering.
That's right. That's not God's intention for you. Yeah. God's intention is that, you know, like, sure, you've got pain now in you and it needs to be released because it's in you. But God's intention is once it's gone, God doesn't want it back there for you. He wants you free of it. Right? And for most people, and particularly most people on Earth, there is no concept of what it would be like to be free of it.
It's hard to believe that sometimes.
Yeah.
You know, like
This
when
is a
you
part of
so
faith,
much pain, it's like.
Yeah, well, this is part of faith, developing the faith where you go, well, given God's nature, given God's personality, given God's character, why would not this be possible? Yeah. Why wouldn't it be possible? Yeah. And that's the thing, is you as you develop those qualities, you realise these things, and your faith will increase, and then you'll have a strong desire to do the thing. And this applies everywhere, spirit world here. If you can understand it here, you're going to understand it better there, for sure. Yeah. And you look at, when you pass, you look at the Earth and you go, wow, that was like baby experience, you know. So I had my 100-year baby experience on Earth, if you're unfortunate. And
Yeah, I see what you mean when you say that. Yeah.
well, you know, in its current state, you know,
Yeah.
it'd be different if it was in a perfect state, wouldn't it? You'd be fortunate to live here 150, 200 years and enjoy the baby state in an environment God intended it to be. But as it is now, it's a vast distortion of what God intended it to be. So it's quite unlucky to live 100 years old, because you're living in a place that's like
Pretty full on.
And unless you're at one with God, it's pretty hard to handle, to be frank. And you know, obviously if you're at one with God, it wouldn't bother you too much, but you might not last that long either. But who knows? But you know, it doesn't, what I'm saying is this is just a temporary state. We're temporary residents in an alien land, and it is an alien land now.
Yeah.
It's not the God's created land, it's an alien land. And we're temporary residents in this sort of far out alien environment, right? And it's time to, have some faith that, okay, there's a whole heap of possibilities in our future if we start imbibing the principles and really getting them in our heart solid. We have the potential of changing this alien land into a friendly land.
Into kind of what God initially intended it to be.
That's right, that's the potential. But if that doesn't happen, we're guaranteed of it when we pass.
If we're in a good place.
Of course.
Yeah.
But if the principles are in your heart, you're going to be in a good place.
Yeah.
Yeah. Automatically. You'll be in a good place. And you have confidence in that, the second sphere is far better than here, and it's not hard to get to the second sphere. It's just principle of truth, and that's all you require to get to the second sphere. Just one principle, understanding it in your heart. That's all you need to get to the second sphere. Right. So, principle of truth, second sphere straight away.
Just the emotions about that. Just the emotions about the truth.
That's right. Just that. Just having that principle in your heart, you'll be in the second sphere as soon as you arrive. Like, why wouldn't you not want that, And it doesn't really matter. And on earth, by the way, too, the principle of truth helps you a lot. Like, it helps us a lot. Like, there's so many situations that we faced, even in our Triple A, where if we weren't truthful, it would have gone much, much, much worse.
Like the media and stuff,
Yeah, and not just the media, but immigration, customs, all sorts. Yeah, much worse. Yeah.
So even though the sin of the world is how it is, even living in the truth, in amongst all the sin of the earth, it still worked out better for you.
Well, it would have been worse.
Yeah, it would have been even worse, wouldn't it? If you.
So it's not to say it was great, because the sin of the world still exists. But imagine if we had joined the sin of the world and been untruthful. Wow, that would be really, really bad. It couldn't have any positive outcome then.
There's plenty of people who say they want to kill me. There's plenty of people who, there's all sorts of things that happen when we meet new people. And plenty of people who are terribly spirit influenced and violent, potentially violent, that we meet, And if you're not in the harmony with love and truth with them, things can get out of hand pretty quick. If you're in harmony with love and truth with them, it gives you the best possible outcome in the circumstance.
Thank you, guys. Yeah.
So I think we might leave it there for today, hey?
Thanks for your participation, everyone. Thank you.
These discussions about the principles are good, eh? Yeah, it also, what I find with the discussion about principles is that it helps you get to the stage where you feel like this is actually possible.
It's possible, and it's a good thing. Yes.
When you're so focused on your individual sins, you go, man, there's thousands of them. I'm ever going to get through them, and I've often looked at my own in this life, and because this life's a new experience for me. The first century, I didn't have sins to deal with, but in this life, I've had sin to deal with, and you look at all the sins you've got to deal with, and you go, wow, if you just focused on them, it'd be very depressing all the time.
Makes it bigger than you, doesn't it?
Sorry?
Makes it bigger than you.
Yeah, yeah.
Principles are not emotion, they're not.
That's right. So the beauty of the principles in your life is that you've got something bigger than everything to hold on to, and bigger, and when you start putting, once they're in your heart and you start, they're in your day-to-day life, you go, wow, it's like, how powerful is it? Like your faith increases like markedly in constantly engaging the principles, because every time you engage a new principle, wow, that worked out really good, didn't it? Considering how bad it was looking, you know, and how good it turned out. It's like, wow, that could have turned out really bad, and it turned out really quite good. And you start seeing all of these things happening, and it just gives you more and more faith that the principles and God's love and the principles in your heart, God's love in your heart, everything much more beautiful than it would have otherwise been. Yeah.